As an existing life science company since 1995, we know how great it is to do the business in Palmetto State. Welcome to you and your team, Steve. I'm Jody Chastain, President and CEO of the Right Dose Corporation and SC board member. I lead Columbia-based Right Dose, a proven 27-year leader in the aseptic production of sterile single-dose medications for the contract development markets, as well as generics and 503B outsourcing. Our constant advancements in the field have delivered more than 10 billion doses since 2012 without a single interruption. As CEO, guiding more than 500 employees, I understand the importance of our next discussion, leading for success. Clemson's founding Dean of the College of Science, Cynthia Young, will moderate the discussion, which will glean the thought-provoking and life-changing insights on how to stay on top of your game personally and professionally from panelists Dr. Marjorie Jenkins, Eboni Martez, and Sean Saulsberry. Join me in welcoming them to the stage, please.
I've been through a lot, but I'm still flirty. Is everybody back up in the building? It's been a minute, tell me how you're healing. Cause I'm about to get into my feelings. How you feeling? How you feel right now?
Who needs to stand up? Y'all doing okay? I feel like it's been long. Thank you so much for being a part of this. My name is Cynthia Young. Thank you, Jody, for introducing us. I'm the Dean of Clemson's College of Science, and real fortunate to know these three movers and shakers and leaders in their field. Dr. Marjorie Jenkins, if you don't already know her, she's the Dean of the University of South Carolina College of Medicine in Greenville. You have all kinds of other titles like Associate Provost and all kinds of other things, but you're the Dean of Medicine at USC Greenville to me and a great partner. Next to her, we have Sean Saulsberry, who is a senior manager with Ernst & Young right here in Charleston. Sean, it's great to have you as well. And Eboni Martez. Hi, Eboni, it's great to see you. She is currently the Chief Operating Officer for academics at Prisma Health System. So one of the things we thought that would be good today, we've got a lot of professionals here. We also have, I think James said, 60 students. And we just wanted to get a little bit of insight. You all three are in very different sectors. Marjorie, I really think of you as patient-centric, patient-facing, medical education. Sean, you really started as a computer scientist, and now you're in strategy and helping businesses and clients really move forward in a very thoughtful and strategic way. And Eboni, you're really the engine that keeps us going because you're in that financial operations world as the COO. So, we've got about, there's a clock here somewhere, 25 minutes. I've got just a few questions for each of you, and we'll tee it up and see where we start. We're going to start at 30,000 feet, and the first question is really about why. So would you share with everyone who's here today a little bit about why you're so passionate about the life sciences, and maybe some history as to what got you here?
Sure. I guess I'll start. I grew up in Appalachia. I'm number 8 of 8 children. Very rural area, underserved. Mom widowed at 34 with no high school diploma. And I guess I'm here today where I'm at and so passionate about the life sciences and about what we've been talking about today, which is diversity and inclusion for all, because my mom died of breast cancer at 53. Yeah. And so that was a big driver for me to try to push forward and to become a doctor and to support our students who are going to be the next generation of physicians and really create that opportunity in marrying research with education so that we get answers that will change lives and save lives in South Carolina and the nation.
Thank you for sharing that, Marjorie. Sean?
First of all, thank you so much for having us on this panel. It's really an honor. I grew up here in Charleston, a native, growing up in Charleston Heights. And so being raised by my grandparents, it was quite a different dynamic for me. They did so much to take care of me and to instill some of those basic values. But from a healthcare perspective, I saw a lot happening that I couldn't process then, but I have a better perspective now. I saw my grandmother struggle with diabetes, and I remember the nurse would come by periodically to help her take her insulin, and I saw how traumatic that was for her. I also saw, I guess it was before we knew what colon cancer was, my grandfather also died slowly of colon cancer. He was at under the care at Baker Hospital at the time. But just seeing that happen really impacted me, and it helped me to better understand some of the inequities that do exist in underserved areas, and just finding ways to be strategic about kind of help lift that burden a little bit.
We're sure glad you're back in Charleston.
I'm so honored to be back.
You spent some time in North Carolina. Ebony?
Thanks. I would say my why really centered around early in my college years, where I was working at a health center where we did peer education, and it really kind of hit me from an accessibility standpoint, having access to care, and even looking at teens that were my age, early 20s, as well as kind of looking at my family members and thinking about how they weren't necessarily trusting of the health systems, and oftentimes sat in spaces and places and didn't necessarily share what was all kind of going on with them. And it was at that point I really started thinking about how I can impact, and not necessarily being a physician, per se, or being a nurse, because I'm a fearful of blood, but I wanted to make sure that there were some areas that I can find myself in providing supports and advocacy. So from that kind of stemmed a career of working for the infrastructure standpoint as it relates to translational research and finance and operations and things like that, to make sure that those who are front-facing to the patients actually have the resources and things that they need to be able to provide optimal care.
Very good. So thank you for sharing that. That kind of starts us at 30,000 feet with the big why. Now let's get down a little bit to the how. I asked you all, we've all met and talked, and I asked them, to really share, I called them gold nuggets, but, a few gold nuggets on, how you lead, how you live, your guiding core values or guiding principles. And like I said, we've tailored it because we've got a lot of professionals here in the life sciences. We also have a lot of students here too. And so I think you'll hear from all of them kind of a variety of answers, which were fun for me to hear about. So let's, Sean, you go first.
So I guess 3 nuggets for me would be really sacrifice being happy now for joy later. And for me, that's all about the work you have to put in, to really make a difference in what you want to do. And that sometimes you don't see the results right away, but the joy comes later. So keeping that in mind. Second, for me, is really not being intimidated by what you do not know. Being a consultant at EY, we are taught how to learn and how to learn quickly. So I've embraced, at times that there are things that I'm not going to know, but my ability to learn is very high, especially being supported by such a wonderful team. And then for me, it's okay to be different. I was that guy, in Charleston Heights on Jacksonville Avenue, walking down the street singing Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That wasn't a popular thing to do in my neighborhood. But, I embraced who I am over time, and, that has led me into the interest that I have today, which has led me into my career. So those are the 3 things I try to lead with and encourage folks to do.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Ebony, do you want to go?
So I kind of try to blend leaning in personally and professionally, because I always even tell my children, I'm thinking about the students in the room, if you can't look in the mirror, then there's something that you need to check at the time. But I think essentially my nuggets are more so kind of reach one, teach one. I'm not where I am today without those who did not go before me and see kind of gifts or skills that I may not have tapped at the time. So I kind of lead with that, of making sure that there's always, from a business standpoint, a succession opportunity, but mentorship and or coaching support related to that. And I think that's very important. And you can do that personally and professionally. because we all have varied skills and talents. I think another piece that I learned kind of later in my career was the power of using your voice. Oftentimes you may be in spaces and places where you just got a seat at the table, so you're not quite sure how to use it, or you don't want to be confrontational, or you're just trying to kind of, bring in everything. But there is importance of being that difference in the room, because sometimes a different perspective or a different lens per se may provide a different form of insight or contribute to something that people may have not been thinking, or others may have been thinking but maybe just wasn't comfortable sharing at all. So I think use of your voice is very important. And then third is, by nature, I have an MBA MSW, so in community partnerships. So I have always been kind of taught to seek common ground. So whenever I'm meeting with colleagues or I'm hearing different issues or things that need to be addressed, I'm always trying to look for some form of common ground in relation to it first. Once you kind of establish that, it makes it a little bit better for more of a team-oriented activity or progression standpoint towards solutions. So those are my top three.
Very good. Now, Margie, you going to give us some insight into your leadership?
Sure. So first, I would say that in my 30s, I was part of a leadership fellowship, National Leadership Fellowship. And we had a 360 evaluation. Those are always fun. And the consultant actually went over my 360 and said, "You're derailing your career. You're never going to be a leader." And I thought to myself, well, I can just give up now and not try to be a leader, or I can change who I am, and I can learn. So talented people are not always the best leaders, but we take brilliant, talented people and sometimes elevate them. But I would tell the audience that leadership is a skill, just like other skills that you learn, and you may have natural talents, but it really is a skill set, and keep polishing it, pay attention to it. And the second thing is organizations have seasons, and there's a season of leadership. And if the leader that's recruited in during that season, so for instance, I'm a change leader, and if the organization is ready for change, it should be a good fit, and then synergy happens, and you can create great change. The opposite happens if you stack change leaders upon change leaders. So another change leader and another change leader, then you get fatigue. And then the last advice I received about 15 years ago from a former dean was, it's not how you lead, it's how you leave. And so I would say that if your season as a leader isn't in sync with the season of the organization, then just refer to what I said for number 3.
Yeah. And I'm going to just share with you mine, because I'm, like I said, I'm the Dean of the College of Science at Clemson. One of the ones that I value is really put first things first. Health, family, wellness. It's so important, I think, to really know and own that prioritization, especially your own health, mental, physical. That's one. I always say go outside your lane. Several of you have done this in your careers. We were talking about that earlier, that it's okay to go outside your lane and you're not tracked. There's not a path or a unique path. There's just your path. And then third, and this is really hard for me as a leader, is to tolerate ambiguity. Right? And as consultants, we do that in a very quick way. But really, to me, that's the toughest piece as we're navigating change, is not jumping to quick solutions, but really taking the time to be uncomfortable for a little while as well. Okay, so fun. I'm always intrigued by what people are reading, so I ask them what books they're reading. And full disclosure, I just finished My Life in Full. If you haven't read it, Indra Nooyi, who is the CEO at Pepsi, for over a decade. It's excellent. I just finished. Share with us a little bit about what y'all are reading, and maybe why. I don't care. Just go.
I'm laughing. Well, I'm currently reading the concise version of the 48 Laws of Power. Robert Greene kind of did the abridgment, and I think it's Ajost. Elders Ajost is the actual author. So it was a joke and from conversation with friends, and we were kind of talking about kind of navigating through ambiguity, and what's more ambiguous than life sciences and healthcare right about now. And so the focal point of the book is more so, it's often referenced in the military, so a lot of military officials read it, but it's about navigating and kind of looking at pitfalls and having certain rules in place for engagement in unknown environments. So that's my read right now.
Very good, thank you.
My read as of late has, I think when we talked, I was reading Just Lead by Anton Gunn, which is a really practical guide to just using what's inside of you already to be effective in leadership. But since we talked, and I think it's along the same lines, I've read this book called Straight Shooter by Stephen A. Smith. And that really had an impact on me because it shows there's seldom a linear trajectory within your career. There are always obstacles, there are always challenges, there are things that you're gonna have to bounce back from. There are times when you're gonna have to reinvent yourself. There are times when you're gonna have to say, I was wrong. But I think what I heard throughout that book was, accepting where you are wrong, but also not letting it ever stop you. And that's really, when I think about the opportunities in healthcare and what is possible, I think we saw some data that shows some things that are just not right, especially when it comes to trials and leaving out certain groups from trials. And that's horrible. But at the same time, there's opportunity. Because of those mishaps, there's opportunity to find better ways of doing that and being inclusive and making sure we're making a difference.
Thank you.
Sure. So I'm going to go back to my mom, who battled breast cancer from Appalachia. And then I battled breast cancer last year. So I was able to do some introspection and kind of think about the journey. I was in medical school when she was diagnosed, that she had versus the access that I had, the new therapies that I had that cured me, I hope. I hope I'm a survivor at this point. And so I'm reading The Political Determinants of Health, and I'm fascinated by the social determinants of health, right? Rurality, low socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity. But now looking at the historical perspective of how health policy and governmental policy actually also marginalizes already marginalized populations. And I think we're just stacking those social determinants of health with political determinants of health by Dr. Dawes. And we need to be working in all of these areas, accountable communities, research into social determinants. But I spent 4 years at the Food and Drug Administration and getting in there and helping create policy, because policy, whoever writes the policy tends to put their own gender into that, their own race, ethnicity. It's just inculcated, not consciously. And so we need more diversity in those platforms so that we can have health policies that really are good for all and not just a few.
Yeah, diversity makes us smarter. We bring diversity
Yes,
and
it does, and it
experiences to the
saves
lens.
lives.
It absolutely does. Thank you for sharing those books. I always ask that, especially with students present, because it doesn't stop in college, all the students. You continue to be lifelong learners, and I think that's part of why you all have been so successful in life, is you've continually learned. With that, I just want to say, before we open up for questions, I just want to thank all three of you for being vulnerable. We just wanted to share a little bit of insight, but it's so important for others to see people who, they can see and identify with your path, and just appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty and, sharing your insights with us today. So with that, I'm supposed to ask if anyone would like to ask our panelists any questions. Yep.
I would like for Marjorie to share all the work she's done on women's health.
Okay.
That's important, and I'm not sure that everybody knows about some of our past experiences.
Got it. So Lou Kennedy says,
Thanks, Lou.
you're being voluntold.
There you go.
Okay. So Lou wants to chair Marjorie
Happy to
around
do that.
women's health.
So I'm a recovering chemical engineer, and in my first practice, I'm an internal medicine physician. I noticed, I do adult medicine, so I noticed there are vast differences in how men and women communicate, more side effects in my women patients. And when I went into academia in Texas, I began to look at sex and gender specific medicine. And I actually had one of my chairs tell me that they would pull my license, my medical license, if I talked about sex and gender specific medicine, because it was made up. Because men and women really are the same, right? So I said, okay, so that was in 2002. Tell me not to do something, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So in 2002, I began really focusing on sex and gender women's health. We created the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health while Mrs. Bush was First Lady. I led that for several years, established that in West Texas and Dallas. Led a book for primary care physicians about sex and gender differences for practitioners. I'm obviously a big champion for the fact that women aren't just small men, and that we have mounds of science. So there's a 900-page tome of sex and gender medicine written by Marianne Legato out of Columbia that was published in '02. And I put that by my bedside, and I read it over 1 year. And it changed my life, it changed my career. And then lastly is no research discovery will ever change a life. It won't save a life either, unless it traverses through a learning environment to our students, who will then apply it to the patients and the communities that they serve. And so that has been a big area for me, to get the research into the hands of the practitioners to ensure that we're taking the best care of every patient. And so when people see me coming, they know exactly what I'm going to talk about.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, when we think about the pipeline, it's bright. It is so bright. When we look, you know, at Clemson, South Carolina, we're seeing it, 70% of the life sciences are women. We're seeing more African-American, Hispanic, coming into the pipeline and staying in the pipeline, which is, and they're becoming doctors and lawyers and strategists and, COOs, and we're just getting different lenses. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, besides Lou, does anyone else? I love Lou Kennedy. We can't see real well.
I've got a question. For younger students in high school and college.
Oh, I know your voice. It's Danny from
Yes.
Governor's School. Where are you, Danny?
Right up here.
Danny, wave your hand. Oh, hey,
I'm up
Danny.
here.
For
Hello.
those of you who don't know, he leads the Governor's School of Math and Science. Good guy to know in Hartsville. All right, Danny, I know your voice.
Thank
Go.
you, Cynthia. So for students that are emerging and want to go into life sciences, what areas, academic areas and soft skill areas are you seeing most efficient in the young workers that are starting into that area?
You want to take that? You want me to take it? Anybody?
So I'm going to take the approach of being a mom who has someone going and has an interest in biomedical engineering. I was advised and counseled by many different groups related to more so in the middle schools, making sure that they're taking those kind of more advanced maths, ensuring that at least prior to them leaving 8th grade, they had algebra in place and made sure that their sciences were also more complex, because what you found is if they did not take like the chemistries, or if they did not have any of the other classes that might be tied to engineering or things like that, that kind of puts them, I wouldn't say at a disadvantage, but it creates additional more working that might have to bridge once they get into college. And I find that too when we're starting to think about our admissions, when we're looking at, so I'm smiling at Dr. Jenkins because I am currently transitioning as the Associate Dean for the School of Medicine and sit on the committee, but we find ourselves related to the bridging for even the sciences, for the medical schools to be able to kind of get to that path. But I would start looking early, not waiting until high school, quite honestly, looking at different exposure activities, even after school programming, to be able to encourage that, that zeal in the STEM, and just let them know, even with English language arts, a lot of the reading and the problem solving and all of that starts there. So I even monitor that as a parent and make sure that that translates through all of their medical, not medical school, one day maybe, but middle as well as high school learning as well.
Well, we have, at the School of Medicine Greenville, we're the most diverse medical school in South Carolina, and we've intentionally done that and attracted students from all phases and areas in South Carolina. And I would say that when students come to me in high school to ask, what should I do in college to go to medical school? I tell them you don't have to be a chemical engineer to go to medical school. And I actually encourage them to do something off the beaten path. If that's their passion, you can get the prerequisites for medical school, but do something that you really love that you'll be a well-rounded student as well. And research shows that we need to start speaking to our students about STEM and also about engineering, medicine in the 3rd grade.
Wow. Wow. 3rd grade. Wow. I was sitting on the other side. I volunteer to interview students coming into Ernst & Young all the time. It's one of my favorite things to do. And what I get to see, bright minds, wonderful, wonderful students. But what I always encourage them to do, it's one thing to focus on your discipline, but it's quite another thing to focus and lean into other disciplines that are going to be effectual in you creating solutions. And so maybe I am a computer science major, okay? But at the very same time, I'm surrounded with a great health services practice. And so I have SMAs that I lean into, but as a strategist, strategy goes across all disciplines. And there are nuances within each practice, but the idea of strategy is pretty much the same across the board. So I would say to any student, you take a look at me, so yes, I made a 620 on the SAT. I took it twice, and that was my total score. And I didn't come from the best high school. I didn't have the best upbringing. And I'm not saying I'm like the premier model of quote unquote success, but I'm something, let's just say I've done better than what has been expected of me. And the reason I've done that, I've been able to do it is because of a pure curiosity and a passion for what I love doing. And strategy is one of those things. So if you figure out what it is you love and pursue it to no end, I think you will find yourself in a successful place at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Danny and I have had this conversation. Danny, we got to teach them to fail, and that's okay. I think we do that really well in science. Is that you've got to fail to get to the breakthroughs, and you hit on it. I don't know which one. Do we know which one of us that is? Okay, we're gonna see if it's me. The convergence, you hit on it earlier, Sean, of the really big breakthroughs come at that convergence, but being able to we know that these students coming out are going to go across several careers in their lifetime, not work at one company. So really having exposure to a broad curricula, themes, but also that integration of those to tackle some real problems. Yeah. Any other questions? Now that we got the mics, is it me? Oh, it's Marjorie.
Oh my goodness.
It's you.
That's terrible.
Any other questions? I'm looking to see.
I think it's on.
Okay. Once. Anyone? Okay, well, please thank our 3 panelists. And if anyone would like to talk to them later, you're going to be around for the rest of the conference. So we'll hang around, and if anyone wants to catch up with us later. Thank you.